everything was not pleasant in Pleasantville because it wasn't necessarily God's way. And so the agenda of America back then was this: not do things God's way, love each other. The agenda of America back then was buy more stuff. And some of that's still going on today. And so if you look at the statistics, in the 50s, food purchases increased by 30%. Clothing purchases increased by 20%. Household goods and furniture purchases increased by 240%. Because somebody had an agenda. It wasn't God's. And so we live in different times. Back then, you had cheap energy, gas was low. You had, if you were a certain type of person, you can get a good job, you can get a good school loan, school program, educational opportunities, affordable home loans. We know that's out the window. It was all made to promote this agenda, to buy more stuff. Let me let you in on something. Consumerism, buying more stuff, is not the agenda of the family. That's not doing family God's way. What is doing family God's way? Let's go to our text. That first verse, very controversial. Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Now, here's the context. Remember I told you about the head of the household, the pater familias, super dad, sometimes psycho dad. He still was in charge of his daughters, even when they got married. So if he was like, I don't like how this dude is doing things, he's poor, I could hook you up with somebody richer, he could divorce him. He could do whatever he wanted because he was still the head. And so Paul is saying, no, that's not God's agenda for marriage. I want you, as followers of Christ, to be one flesh. That's God's agenda for marriage. Genesis 2:24. Later on, you can take time to look it up. But it says a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one. Now, Paul couldn't mess up any of the laws. He had his own particular mission. He was out there to preach the gospel. But he said, let's work within the law. And the law said, if you wanted to, you can change from having your dad as the head to having your husband as the head. Paul was working within his surroundings because let's not look at the details. Let's look at the principle. The principle is he wanted husbands and wives to be together, to be one flesh. So throw out independent woman. There is no independent woman in the Lord. But guys, there is no independent man either. Because it's about the two not having a social contract and arrangement, but the two becoming one flesh. And if you look at the word submit, it's a military term. It means to arrange under. You know how it is in the army. The generals are over the colonels are over the majors are over the captains are, and it goes on and on and on. They're arranged under each other. It's a military term, and you have to ask, why did he use a military term for marriage? He's working within the culture. Remember I said the number one agenda was make more soldiers. So the Romans get this. Oh yeah, submit. Like they do in the army. We don't have a military culture now. And so we have to dig past the layers and see what Paul is getting at. He's saying connect, be together as is fitting in the Lord. That's what a godly marriage, a godly family is about. And just before you think you got off the hook, gentlemen, husbands, love your wives. It seems simple enough, but the word love, we use it all the time. Even guys use it with other guys. Love you, man. You know how it is. You kind of look like, hey, I'll be doing that stuff, man. We use it flippantly. I love ice cream. I love this music. But this is not that type of love. It's not a sexual love. It's not a friendship-like love. This is self-sacrificing in the interest of the other. It's the word that we use when we say, for God so loved the world. It's God's kind of love. He gave his only son. He sacrificed himself for our best interest. A lot of times you grow up and you think, man, marriage is going to be a piece of cake because I'm going to have a maid. And I'm going to have a secretary. That's what I used to think. Like, man, I went in. I was actually like, Yvette's going to be my secretary. And I got a rude awakening. That's what we grow up like. We grow up thinking our wives are going to be mom. That's not how it works, gentlemen. You two are equals, submitting and loving each other, submitting to one another and loving each other. And it sounds easy, but I'm going to tell you it's hard because I believe, now this is not the gospel, but I believe men are just way more selfish than women. We like our stuff and we don't want to give it up. And it's just about us. You hang around the guys, like, here's two conversations. Guys talk, and they both talking about what they want to talk about. Women talking, it's like, I'm doing bad. Oh, really? Tell me more. Guys like, I don't want to hear any more of your problems, man. Go get some therapy. Go get a wife. I don't want to hear it. And so the higher standard, the higher expectation, I believe, is on the man. Self-sacrificial love in the interest of the other. That's God's way. That's God's way. If you have two people who are totally different, you know the book, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. People from different planets. There's got to be some self-sacrificial love up in that. It just can't happen any other way. You left the cap off the toothpaste. You leave the dishes in the sink for like 3 days. Come on. You do this, you do that. You keep on making that clicking sound. Stop. Somebody's got to sacrifice. That's doing family God's way. Then moving on, he says, children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. And this is why I say you have to read it in context, because you might miss something here. You might think they're just talking about, little rugrats, little bitty kids. Remember, the head of household was the head over grown children who weren't even in the house. So he's talking to even the adults. And I don't know about you, but I was so happy when I turned 18. No more freedom. Did the Braveheart.